All right, hello everyone. My name is Tom Olson with Zenergy Building Technologies. This is the BMS training for BPL rare books at the Copley branch. Enjoy. So the way the system's set up, we have basically a server up in the, I don't know if it's in the 6th floor or the 7th floor, the mechanical space up close to the roof, in a panel that communicates to all the controllers that we have installed that do monitor the temperature and control things like the airflow and the valves controlling temperature and everything. So although that server communicates out to all these controllers, and it's a communication network. That all goes back to what you're looking at here, which is the web page hosted by that server. So everything you're looking at on this, when I'm clicking through these screens here, is basically whatever that server can see. So at times, that server might not be able to see anything because the communication is down, or there's a power issue, or ideally everything is communicating and operating correctly. So we're going to go over kind of how you can troubleshoot whether or not what you're looking at is actual live data or not, because that's important to know. And the steps to troubleshoot that. But I know what we're looking at here is that specific device up in the penthouse. Now, I believe there's going to be some integration into the BPL supervisor, they call it, which is that communicates to all the branches. Effectively, the graphics stay the same. So what you're looking at really stays the same, but it's just kind of a different viewpoint. And when you're in the supervisor, that connects to all the local servers, which are called JACEs. That's what the server that we're looking at here, it's called the JACE. So whether you're looking at the supervisor or here, effectively the same graphics. But so I guess I'm not sure when that'll actually happen, whereas these will be into that top level server. But what we're looking at here is just the one just for rare books. So it's only for rare books. So when you first log into the building automation system, this address is not what you guys are gonna connect to. Unfortunately, I don't know that address right now. So this address isn't really important for you right now, because unfortunately it's not the address on the BPL network. It's the address on the Zenergy kind of local network. So this is less meaningful to you. But when you do connect correctly, you will get this login page. So this is a good start. The way you actually log into the system is a it's not really two-factor, but it's a two-step process. So you put in your username first, and then you put in your password, and for security reasons, apparently that's a little more secure, but I don't even think we have the option of turning that off. So put in your username first, which for me is just ZBT, Zenergy Building Technologies, and then you put in your password after.
What's your password?
Yeah, well, I got to make sure that I'm on the right field here, so I'm not. If you guys have a shared computer or anything, to actually change users, you can't actually just edit this right now. You actually have to hit this change user thing. So just FYI, if you ever want to log in as someone else, or when you're typically, I know this is probably something that Zenergy isn't really responsible for, I guess. But typically, everyone would have their own user login, so everyone can kind of be tracked. So no one's responsible for something someone else did and all of that. So it's a good idea, like if there is a shared computer or something, to not leave your login saved in the browser so that everyone just logs in as the same person and that kind of stuff. Having said that, every Zenergy employee typically just logs in as ZBT, so you won't really know who it is, but might be me. After you put in your credentials correctly, you hit login, you'll be viewing this beautiful homepage. At the request of the user, if there are certain global settings or anything that might be useful to everyone, we might put it on this splash page here. Otherwise, we kind of just keep it simple. General overview of the weather, which is always helpful to keep in mind when dealing with the building automation system. The weather obviously plays a big part in what we're doing. Not that we're actually using the weather, but it's good for the user to understand, like, well, it's weather, humidity levels and everything, especially for...
That box on the top, where is that pulling the information?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So everything in the middle here, the weather, that's Logan weather. So that's not really pertaining to here. It's just kind of a general idea. Everything you see on this top bar here, you're going to see on, or at least you should see on every graphic. So if you don't, I'll correct that at some point. You should see on every graphic. Basically, starting from the left here, just the site you're looking at, which is Rare Books, kind of some general title and description that'll help you verify what you're looking at. This box here is the date and time and the outside air temperature for that local server up in the penthouse. So all of the Zenergy controls for Rare Books are going to be controlling off of that outside air temperature. So that's always a good one to keep an eye on as you're looking through graphics. I'm not sure how other branches are set up, but as far as any Zenergy site that you look at, it's a good idea to always keep an eye on that, because if that isn't reading, say that reads -50 or 47 or something, it's way off of what you should expect. The whole system thinks that, so it's going to affect how the whole system is operating.
Is that a sensor outside?
Yes, exactly. These are both sensors that are wired to the controllers upstairs. The same with the date and time. If your date and time's off, your schedule is going to be off. So, and your trending's off. So it's a good idea to always make sure, at least keep an eye on this. If it does change, that can be updated, but it's can definitely cause problems. And then, just Zenergy here. This is the software version that might play into account.
Daylight savings time already in...
Yeah, it should be automatically updated. It's, I believe, as long as we're connected to the internet, it should be polling a time server to make sure that its time's always up to date. But yeah, that should be accounted for. As you notice, we're in daylight savings time. Because you're going to have all this information on the screen, if you ever see something, if you have a problem or see something that you can't explain, or you want information on, or want the other guys to look at, we always recommend you just take a screenshot, the whole screen. Make sure you get all that information in there. All that date and time and outside air temperature and everything is always important to have whenever you do a screenshot. I always try and get the actual my computer's time in there too, just in case the person didn't notice that the time was off. That could explain a few things. So yeah, so that's kind of the home page. Once you get to the home page, I usually recommend users to start with the floor plans. Floor plans are always the greatest place to learn the building, learn the space, see the temperatures, understand what's going on. How we do that is just to go to click on the floor plans button. I think the default, you can either hit the floor plans or any of these specific floors you're looking for. As you can see, you have a background of the space that should hopefully look somewhat familiar to you. We have some sensor readings here. If you notice, there are some with red backgrounds. What is this here? I think that's an electrical closet, so that's fine there. Basically, everything you're looking at here on any of the floor plans, unless specified otherwise, is a space temperature sensor, or a space thermostat sensor. So either space temperature or space humidity. That is the actual sensor wired on the wall that's going to communicate back to the system. As you can see, the red background, we'll go over the background colors at some point, but the red background means alarm, so technically these values are an alarm because the humidity is outside the acceptable range. This is being looked at, so this is a known issue that we're addressing, but just bear in mind. If we look at,
Sorry, before you leave that, what's
Yeah, go ahead.
So is everything we're looking at here, T-stats or sensors?
so this is the space pressure for, this should really be in this room, actually. I believe this is the space pressure for the lab space here. Good question. Otherwise, yeah, everything is this as well. Otherwise, everything is a temperature sensor, yeah.
And sorry, one other question. So I understand that the, like 409, 410, those correspond to the room number.
Yeah.
What about the other ones? Like what is that?
That's a good question. So on these floor plans, there are just temperature sensors for monitoring the book stacks.
Yep.
And those don't have actual links to any graphics. So the rest of these, like on a specific room, this is a link to a graphic for the controller designated for that room. On the general stacks area, these temperature sensors are really just being identified by their location on the mechanical drawings is actually what's being defined here. I mean, that can be edited to whatever is useful for the end user, which is all you guys.
Okay.
So,
So we could do a stack number for
Yeah.
example, maybe, or
yes. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, this is not about like labeling, but we can change the labeling is what it sounds like.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
So then in the stacks area, we have many temperature sensors that we can't see anything about really from a link. There's no link.
There's
Then we have two temperature and humidity sensors.
Yes, so if you're looking at this here, all of these are just informational temperature sensors throughout the room. And yes, these larger ones that have the actual room numbers on them correspond to a specific VAV box that is controlling the temperature and airflow in that space.
Can we pull trends on all of them?
Yeah,
How far back?
we'll go over trending. Our trending, I can double check that. Typically, we would set it up as, a month or two locally, and then that would get stored, backed up onto the server, onto the supervisor, so that it would be available for, as far back as you want there, once it's integrated to the Niagara supervisor. We don't have unlimited resources on this server, but that they effectively would on the supervisor. So and that brings up a good point. Any of the text or any of the information here is for you guys to understand what's going on. So if it needs to get edited or changed or modified anyway, I mean that's perfectly acceptable. It's all customizable. So it's whatever makes sense to you guys to use and make sense of it. So if we look at, I think we looked at here. So on the readings that are actual links to graphics, like this one. Clicking on the room number brings you to the graphic associated with that space. We're going to go over all these specific graphics at some point, but just kind of the navigational purposes. I would come here, look at this trend, or maybe modify a set point or something, and then go back to the floor plan, or maybe I want to go to the fifth, or maybe there was an issue here and I want to investigate the air handler that's serving this equipment, I can go from here. We can look at the 5th floor plan, which is going to be more of the same with the 4th floor. But so as you can see, there's more of these just loose temperature sensors that are just for really monitoring trending and alarming, and then some of the other devices that would link to a specific graphic for that space. I don't believe there's really anything on the 6th or 7th floors as far as the floor plan is concerned, so I might even just remove those.
Well, water bugs.
Yeah, we can get those on the. I think there's just one. I have to double check at how many we have on in the
They're all
mechanical room in there.
The humidification systems and the water filtration system.
Yeah, I don't know if all those are tied into this system. We have I think we have a common area sensor. But I have to double check if they're all tied in. But yeah, any of those we can get on the floor plan. There's also some overview pages that can be helpful just to kind of see an overview of all the equipment and everything.
Do you have any floor plan, I mean, is there any information on the roof page or no?
Typically we would, and right now there isn't.
Okay.
Trying to make sense of what I'm looking at here. So I think we'd come up here.
That's the skylight in the middle, looks like.
Yeah.
The lower part of the screen would be Boylston, the bottom roof edge.
Yeah. So I mean, typically on a floor plan, we could just put the, where for this job is really just the air handler and the chiller up there.
That has its own screen anyway, right?
Yeah, and those have their own graphics. I think the other main system that we haven't really looked at yet. This will be an important graphic just to verify, what's going on with the cooling. And then as far as the rest of the navigation, there's some kind of, admin level stuff, scheduling, alarms, alarm database, the user database, that kind of stuff that we'll go over. So let's start with how you would go through looking at a space that maybe you want to change a set point or look at if there's an issue or something. So let's just stick to a. You have to bear with my connection speed is a little slow. Just I'm on the Wi-Fi here, VPN back to my office, and then basically VPN back to our panel upstairs. So it's a little slow at times, but bear with me here. So your main temperature control and humidity control in all the spaces are we call it VAV boxes. Do you have a VAV system in the rest of the building, or is it just this rare book space? Or
We have one.
yeah, you have another one, or okay. The way a VAV system works is you have one common air handler, and that feeds air to all these subsystems that are responsible for a room or multiple rooms. Effectively, say there was a box for this room. As the heating, cooling, or CO2 demand increases and decreases in the room, this box using this damper is going to modulate the airflow in that space. So if we have a bunch of people in here and it starts getting hot, we start to we want to look for a little extra air to cool down the space. When you do that, the damper starts to open. As the damper starts to open, and say as it gets hot out, all the dampers in all the spaces start to open. your air handler, your fan needs to basically make up the difference of now, well, we're looking for all this more air, so your fan speed needs to ramp up. So the way it does that is it's actually monitoring the pressure in the duct that's feeding into this box. And as that pressure drops, as all those dampers start to open, as that pressure drops, the fan starts to ramp up and accounts for that. So the whole system works all together. So there's a lot of moving parts in it, and you can. It's a great design as long as it's it's designed properly. When you start tweaking with airflows and damper positions and all of this, now you may not realize it, but you could be affecting the entire system just by making small changes with airflow and stuff. So as far as the airflow is concerned, it's typically, unless you have a good understanding of the whole system and the fan and what you can do with it, it's typically best to just leave the airflows as they are, because they were designed specifically for the size and the load of the space.
So, quick question, we're under low humidity alarm, is that what it is now?
That's what we're looking at there,
So
yeah.
Laura and Jess, what do you want for humidity in those rooms? What's your premier goal for humidity, for preservation?
I don't remember what we had set out. I don't think we dealt too much. Did we do a lot with?
Was it like 40, 45?
Well, our lowest point, I think, was 30.
Right, we
But
talked
that's
about
about
like a
like-
seasonal range.
Yeah.
but I don't
Yeah.
remember.
So right now their space point humidity set point is at 50%.
Yeah, so the sequence we were given was 50% and alarming at plus or minus 2%, which is pretty tight. So that's why everything's an alarm, because you're 2% off, which is almost the accuracy range of the sensor itself. So it's really not that useful. So if 30 was acceptable, 30 to 50, or if that needs to get reset based on what's the outside air, what season we're in. I mean, that's definitely doable. But we don't want to be generating these alarms, these nuisance alarms when they don't, when it's perfectly acceptable for you. Is it?
There's seven humidifiers up there, so
Yeah.
you don't want them fighting the cooling system or what you want in that room. So.
Yeah.
Right. And I guess one other question related to the 7 humidifiers and the sensors, which have like buttons on them for people to do stuff if they wanted, but like staff cannot control that, right? They can't, if they touch the buttons, nothing happens.
If that's what you want, absolutely, yeah, for
Okay,
sure.
all right.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's what we want.
Okay, yeah, if
Set it and forget it.
yeah, if it's only adjustable through the graphics, that's perfect. Yeah, that's definitely. I think we have I think there's just maybe we can put it on the graphic here or something, just like a on-off, whether the thermostat is adjustable or not. And if you turn that off, it's no local adjust.
So 39%. Good for up there.
I would think for an office or something that's is it going to differ as well from the, say, this space versus the book stacks or something? Would you want a little tighter?
I mean, we can let it be warmer than in the book stacks, we just don't want it to, and again, I forget what our ranges exactly were, I think they were 30 to 50 or 30 to 55. It might have been even been 25 to 55, I can't.
Okay. Yeah, that's a lot more.
We want to be flexible.
That's a lot easier to change. So what we can do is we'll set it to a high and low. It'll be a set point. So we already have that set up here. This kind of what we're trying to get to. But this alarm, the values at which we alarm at will just be a high and low. So rather than having this tight band for what we're looking at, you'll just have it. And maybe I'll put that on if it makes sense, maybe that's like a homepage thing or something like that.
Can you also trend the weather, so we know when the outside weather is happening and
Yeah,
the
these,
book storage areas, we can see them integrate with the humidity and know that it's
yeah, all those are going to be trending through that global sensor. All your humidity's coming through the air handler and everything. You're going to know that's all being trended. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so yeah, we'll go over on this, while we're on this page, we'll go over kind of the colors and all that kind of stuff and what it means and what you're looking at here. So say in this, for this room, imagine this was in this room here. There'd be a thermostat on the wall that is adjustable, but wouldn't be adjustable to the user. This value right here, this space temp, is the number that you'd be looking at on the screen. That number doesn't have a decimal place, so it's just a whole number, but if it was 70.7, it would read 71 on the screen. In the spaces that have CO2, you'll have a CO2 reading in here. If it doesn't have CO2, you won't. And I believe all of them are gonna have the relative humidity sensor. Because they'll be locked out, there won't be a local override option, so this is really just for unoccupied times if you wanna, let someone in there, turn the unit on and all that, but that sounds like that's not really gonna be something that you guys use. If you were looking for, say 71's too hot for you or it's too cold and you're looking to change that, you have two options. You can either change the active set point of what it's actually looking at right now. So if I were to say that's way too hot for me, it's trying to get to 72, but we really don't need to get there. I'm gonna just right click here and hit set. And I'm gonna say, you know what, really want to be down at 68. It should update.
So what's the protocol on the system if you have heating and cooling set point at the same temperature? You need a differential between?
Yeah, that won't allow you to do that. So, yeah, there we go. There is a minimum differential of 2 degrees between the heating and cooling set points. So if you try and make them less than 2 degrees, it's gonna bump the other one down. So if I were to change the heating set point up to 73 right now, that cooling set point would bump up to 75. So it's always going to float together. Only if that minimum is, affected.
Heated.
Yeah, exactly. So if you noticed, I dropped that set point down, 68 right now. So we're not looking for heating anymore. The reheat valve closed. That's pretty much the only effect that you would have in the wintertime. That's what you would see. If the boilers aren't running, we're not integrated to the heating system, so we don't really know when it's running or not. So we kind of just assume at the moment that you always have heat. It doesn't really affect it one way or the other. But in the wintertime, that's kind of the process you could do there. That is the active set point, what it's looking at right now. If you wanted to, say, change the set point forever and have it always be 68, you would come over here to the kind of the default set points. So if I were to come here and set this to 70, now that's going to update to 70, and that should push your active to 70 currently right now. And you could always, if you actually want it to be 69 right now, you can do that. So those are kind of your heating and cooling set points. This is a constant volume box. I think for the most part they all are. I can click through some of them and see if any of them aren't constant volume. But because this one has the same minimum and maximum flow, basically there's no way it's not going to do anything to cool the space. Typically on a VAV box, you would allow more air in to cool the space. Because your maximum is the same as your minimum, you're just always going to be looking for this 350 CFM here. So you're always trying to bring in 350 CFM. That's your cooling. For heating, as you drop below your heating set point, that reheat valve is going to modulate open to try and to heat the incoming air to the space so that you can heat the space. The other thing that this is going to be responsible for, if it exists with the unit, is the humidifier. So in spaces that have humidifiers, they are looking for, by default, that 50% humidity level in the space. That doesn't appear to be always attainable, obviously, because we're not getting there right now. There's this maximum humidity demand on here that I have set to 75 right now. The humidistat on the ductwork is set to 80%. So if we went over 80% humidity in the ductwork, that humidistat's going to trip off and the humidifier is going to turn off.
We're gonna get an alarm on that?
And you would get an alarm on that. So we're trying to stay right below that humidistat so we leave them running. So that's why you're seeing 75%, which is what you would see up at the humidifier, up in that mechanical space. As you can see, that's not necessarily correlating with our relative humidity value here. So we might have to, this is something that we tweaked recently because they were just recently tripping off on high humidity. We might have to tweak this and allow this humidity to increase more based on that actual sensor reading, because that's really what it's looking at. I'm gonna have to double check that, but you know, it looks like that we have actually some room to grow there with this humidity value of 60%.
So can't maintain demand at 75% units or higher.
Yeah, so I think we might have to let this go a little higher so that, but that's something we're still looking at with through the testing and commissioning process. But effectively, that's the idea. As our humidity in the space drops, this demand for the humidifier is going to increase, and we're supposed to provide more moisture in the air to get the space humid. As we go over that humidity set point, it's going to cycle back and effectively turn off the unit, which we should probably end up seeing pretty soon as far as the weather is concerned. In the spaces that have humidifiers, there is more information about that humidifier if you just click the box that was associated for it. So you notice the dark background here. There's a specific graphic for that humidifier. We are communicating to the controller for it. I believe these are all the points that we get from it. It's a Neptronic humidifier. I think we even have the PDF guide here, the user manual for it, which is useful. It's just the BACnet user guide, but I'll try and change this to be the actual, let me think about that. Maybe we can put the other guide on there too, like a user manual, because the BACnet information is only really useful for this, the points that you're looking at, but it doesn't really tell you much about the unit operation itself. There are 7 humidifiers up in the mechanical room. The first one, HU1, is dedicated for the air handler, and then the rest of them are dedicated for those VAV boxes. So as you're clicking through different spaces, you'll see different humidifiers. They're all unique, HU1 through 7. Just as a side note. So let's go to back to that actually, that VAV. So in general, we were talking about the background colors and the text color and everything. So in general, when you're looking at a given graphic, if it's a green text, that means that point is a control point of some sort that resides in a controller out in the field. So if it was this space here, there's actually right here on the damper, there's a controller that is on this communication network, and any of the points in that controller is actually what we're looking at here. So they're not points residing in the server, they're points residing in the controller right above our head. So that's that green text. That means it's a control point in a controller somewhere. That text does change when the background changes, just for readability, but effectively that's the idea. The background color is a very important part of any any point. So as you notice, the only background color we can really see on this graphic is red. Red means an alarm, so it's in an alarm state. If we went to the alarm page, there's a log of all the alarms, and we would see these 4 humidity sensors all have an alarm associated with it in the log that you can go back in time and kind of reference. If you see a red background, typically that's a bad thing. We try and keep nuisance alarms down to a minimum, so any kind of alarm that you really don't care about, you don't want to be an alarm in the first place. When you see an alarm associated with a pump or a fan or something that's a major piece of equipment, now that's an actual problem. Or if a space is really cold or really hot or something. That's a red background. A red background's pretty bad, as long as it's not something you're expecting to see. Other kinds of backgrounds that you'll see are yellow or orange. Yellow or orange means that there's some kind of communication problem. So yellow specifically means that controller is down. So that controller that we're communicating with, I actually have I might put this on the let me try and find it here. Display. We have like a little guide, like a little cheat sheet for what the background colors mean, so I'll put that on the homepage. Yellow or orange means there's a communication problem. So like I was saying, yellow is specifically that controller is down. The communication to that controller isn't verified back to the server here. What that typically means is a power issue. If it's not a power issue, maybe there's a contractor, an electrician, messing with wires and wires got cut. Maybe a mechanical contractor was servicing equipment,
Always the electric.
pull wires off, who knows, Basically, if yellow or orange is seen there on just one controller, say just this VAV is yellow or orange, we're having a communication issue with that box. So the controller itself might be bad. It possibly might need to be replaced. The thermostat on the wall, technically the communication does run down to the thermostat. So in certain instances, if you have a damaged thermostat, you could technically have a comm issue. If you have an entire floor of communication problems, well, that tells you that you really have a network issue across the whole thing. So maybe the server just lost its communication to all the devices, or maybe the wire got cut downstream somewhere else. So orange is effectively the same as yellow, but it just means that that the point is in fault. So it means that we tried to write to the point, but we weren't successful, so it went into fault. Or we tried to read it or something, but effectively it's the same as yellow. So yellow and orange. The only difference is you might find an orange, like 1 or 2 points on the system occasionally might turn orange. It doesn't mean the whole device is not communicating. It just might mean there's a reason that there's a slow communication on that day or something. But for the most part, like if I came to this page and all the points had a yellow background or an orange background or something, I know there's an issue with that device. Other background colors you'll see, if it's like a gray background, you won't see that really too often, but that just means the device is disabled. Trying to think of what the other ones are. Purple. Purple's a big one. Purple means that there's an override on the equipment. So if I were to right click on this valve here and I were to override it to say 50%, oh, even the valve text goes purple. Notice this purple background, and I hover over it, it says overridden. By the way, whenever you hover over any point, I should have mentioned that, I guess, that status will come through here. So because it's a red background, it does say that in the brackets there that the status of that point is an alarm. Well, same with this. Because that background is purple, the status of that point is overridden. So some user came in and manually set that to a specific thing. When you override something, the logic is no longer part of the equation. So you've really any kind of programming, safety, or whatever that coordinate associated with that piece of equipment is no longer a part of the puzzle. So you just have to be careful with overrides, just to make sure that A, what you're doing, and B, that you remember it so that so it doesn't become an issue a week from now. What's nice about the override feature, if you notice that you can put a time on it. So say there was a meeting in this room for just 2 hours, and you wouldn't really do this, but say you just wanted to open that valve, the reheat valve, for the 2 hours that people in there, you could just put a 2-hour delay on there. And then if we were to come back in 2 hours, that delay should clear on its own. The purple background would go away. The point would go back into whatever the program says that it needs to be in, and everything would be fine. If you go to a graphic and you see a purple background, typically means, all right, someone's been looking at this, they made a change, maybe they're working on it right now, maybe there was an issue or something. It's just something to keep in mind.
Tom, if you lose comm, does the device stay in its last value? So say the valve was half position, you lose comm, does it stay?
Yeah, that's a good question. So basically, if there were an override to be on the point.
Well, be it, say, even the whole system, does it just stay where it was, trying to maintain a set point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so the question was basically if communication goes down, what do all the controllers do? The system isn't reliant on the communication necessarily to control to each space or any given system. So if the communication were to go down for a small time or a large time, it's basically just going to remain in its last state based on its its own sensors and everything. So it's going to continue to run, controlling that process for as long as the communication is down. Yeah, nothing is being directly controlled over the communication from the server. So yeah, if the communication were to go down, this box would still heat as needed in this space, regardless of what's going on. It wouldn't know anything else going on, so it would just keep doing its thing. That's the same for overrides. Say an override is in there, you lose communication, that override's going to stay in there. An override will clear when the device loses power. So that can be kind of a tricky one to recognize from a graphic. So if I were to go to this VAV box and I saw that this reheat valve was at 50%, or say it was at 0%, but the background was purple, if I went up to that box and turned the power off on it and then turned it back on, the graphics here would still say that it's overridden because the server, like the BMS, still thinks it's an overridden point, but that controller actually lost, that override got cleared out when the power cycle happened. So that's another reason to not leave overrides in for a very long time, because you can't necessarily trust the fact that it's going to stay in there forever. It's much better to change set points and let the system operate automatically rather than override something directly. While I'm here, I'm just going to clear this here.
Is there like history kept of changes in set points over time, or is that
Yep.
logged?
Yep, that is one of the logs here. So as far as, we can go over the histories and viewing all that at the end here, but
Okay.
in general, if you want to look at trends or histories more than what's already displayed on the screen, you'd go to the left here, this little hamburger icon guy, and depending on the user's access level, you wouldn't necessarily see everything I'm looking at here. So because I'm an admin user and I have all these checkboxes checked, I see all these buttons, but typically you would just see this navigation tree button. And the one that we're looking for here is histories, so that's kind of where they call them histories, the trends or reports. So what you're looking for specifically, and someone spelled equipment wrong. is the audit log. So the audit log is, or the audit history, is basically a record of every change by a user in the system.
Okay.
So if you notice, this is, yeah, here we go. I'm going to change the timestamp here. So it actually only shows me, I think there's a setting here. It's only showing me 20 values per page, which is kind of annoying. But yeah, you can see here at 153, someone overrode that valve to 50%. It was DBT. I've been here all day, so if you went through this, you'd see everything that I did all day. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's, there's two logs kind of like that, the audit history. The other one's they call it the log history. That's more, that's an underlying software. That's really the software's own log of all the, everything that's going on. It's more for troubleshooting for, someone, a tech or something that would kind of understand what's going on. I mean, when I see this, I can see that we actually have or we at least had a communication at some point, but this is in May anyway, so it's not relative to today. But, all right, let's go back to the home page here. Unclick that button. So let's go back to that VAV and then go through the process. So say we had an issue with that room, we went to the room, we changed set points, we did this, that, basic level stuff. If I came here and I saw this damper was wide open and the CFM for this device is, well, one more thing, just before I carry on, one more thing while we're talking about overrides. There's actually 2 levels of overrides, and depending on your user level, you may not have access to the emergency override is what it's called. That's a top priority override. So that would really just be admin level users or the necessary MCore guys who would say set an override that needs to stay as is, that they don't want to be cleared. An emergency override is your top level priority. Nothing's going to take priority over that. To clear emergency override, you have to do an emergency auto. That's the way, the auto is the way to clear an override if you don't put a time restraint on the override. In fact, with emergency override, there is no time set. The idea is you just want to do it right now. So an emergency override has to be cleared at the emergency auto. An override, you can either put in that time restraint or right-click on the point, select auto, and the override should clear within a time delay. You should see the point update and all that.
Is the heat wheel up on there at all? On the rooftop?
Yeah, we'll look at that. The one thing to keep in mind as you're looking at a page with the points, the green points and everything, because everything you're looking at is in the controller up in the ceiling, there is some time delays associated with that. So, when I right-clicked and released that hit auto, the background turned purple pretty immediately because that was done in the system, that was done in the server. But the actual value of the point took a while to change, and that's because that point resides in the controller. So it has to go over this slow 2-wire network to get to the controller, actually change the value in the controller, and then go back over that 2-wire network back to the server and display here. So there's definitely a time delay there. This isn't a very large site, but depending on your trending and if there are any communication issues, that delay could go anywhere from a second to 30 seconds. When I changed that active set point, it was a little slower because we're not polling those points as fast. So it's just something to keep in mind that the values might not update immediately. It doesn't necessarily mean that A, they didn't update. because it might have updated in the controller, but it might just not be displayed yet on the screen. Or B, yeah, I guess that's, yeah. But you just might need to wait a second to actually wait to see it on the screen. If after minutes it doesn't update, then maybe something, maybe there was an override in there that never got cleared behind the scenes or something, or it's just something to keep in mind that the points, there is a delay when reading the points from the screen. So going back to my the other idea there, so say we had an issue in the office, it's overheating, we're not getting cooling. I go to this VAV box. The damper is at 100%. The discharge air, our air volume that's coming out of the box is 1 CFM, really low. That tells me that likely there's an issue with the air handler. So the air handler must not be running or there's some kind of issue with it. So I would at that point go and click this link and go to the air handler graphic. Now, for an advanced user, they'll probably understand everything that's going on here, and we'll go through kind of the important parts. For the lower level users, basically what you want to see is things moving. If you're in cooling season, you want to see that, the coils are actually filled with, are blue, saying that we're calling for cooling. As you can see, we have your fan. These are the fans here that are actually feeding down to that VAV box. So if these fans aren't running, then we're not going to get any air down to that VAV box. We're not going to be able to cool the space, really heat or cool the space. All these dampers, any damper that's just needs to be somewhat open. So kind of in a general idea, if you came here and saw a bunch of red or a bunch of alarms, say if one of these alarms are in, it probably tripped the unit off and the fan's not running. So you'd see that the fan status is going to read off, and that you have an alarm here. Say it's really cold out and the freeze stat tripped. We brought cold air in, it wasn't able to heat it before that safety tripped. Or say there was an issue with this damper and the fans tried to run, but it built a lot of pressure in the duct. Well, if we see that, we're going to turn the fans off because we don't want to, basically blow up the ductwork. So you may come here and see any of these being red. Down at the bottom here, there's 2 filter alarms. Those are less important. Honestly, I might remove those from this box, just so this box stays kind of, critical alarms rather than, filter alarms, which are less important.
How are they getting statuses from the fans? Is it CTs on measuring current?
Status from the fans are a relay contact on the drive. So all the drives are ABB.
It's not reading actual work being done. It's actually just reading whether or not it's energized.
Well, it's based on what the drive's determining is work. So as long as there is a current draw and it's actually doing something, I think that's when that relay is going to start, is actually going to make. If you came to the screen and you saw all yellow or all orange, there's an issue with the controls. That controller is not communicating, and maybe the whole thing lost power or something. So if that background doesn't exist, well then at least we're communicating to the device if it's this clear background. If you see orange overrides, that likely means someone maybe has it off for a reason. Someone overrode it off. So these are kind of things that I'd be looking at to see if it's operating normally or not. As far as normal operation, we were talking about how that VAV system works, where the dampers open and close as needed, and the way the fans modulate to make sure we have that airflow is monitoring that pressure in the ductwork. That's this sensor right here, this supply air static pressure. If that's reading 0, if the fans aren't running, that's going to read 0. But if this sensor fails, it's going to have an issue with the fans. The fans are going to have a problem. I mean, honestly, it's not with this system, it probably won't be a big problem because if that sensor failed, it would probably read, typically it would fail to 0. The fans would ramp up, which they are already at 100%. So you actually really wouldn't have a big of a problem. The typical idea, so I'll go just through the basic flow of this unit and what it's trying to do. One question that I think we had asked previously and never got a good answer for is, in a space like this, you would typically run this unit 24/7, right? So this is always going to be, running temperature in the air at those tight bands, those temperature settings. Yeah, okay. Your occupied schedule would really just be the amount of fresh air that you're bringing in versus whether if we're just doing recirculation.
That's based on CO2, parts per million.
Based on the schedule, based on a user-defined schedule, say, there's no reason to be bringing in fresh air, at 2 o'clock in the morning if no one's here. But you still want to have the fan running to condition the space, exactly, yeah. We don't want to go a weekend or a week without some kind of conditioning. But all right, well, we can talk about that with the schedules then.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the reason for this entire project is to, have the preservation environment for the collections and everything.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know how normally.
That's
you
the
have
priority.
Occupied, unoccupied.
That's the priority,
Right.
right?
Right, but I think that we're also open to sustainability measures and options that.
Yeah, use less energy as much as you can.
Yeah, but I think the preservation commissioning is the part that is going to tell us what we want ultimately.
Yeah, okay.
When you treat your office space differently than we have both,
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
so there might be spaces, and then, maybe I don't know how,
Night
I don't know how
setbacks.
granular it gets, and if you could sort of put those spaces into occupied or unoccupied, but.
Yeah.
I can't imagine we're not running, we might change the bands between the
A little.
segments and stuff, but I can't imagine we're turning,
Right.
we're unoccupied ever. in terms
Yeah.
of-
So effectively, what overnight, what you'd see is your supply fans here would continue to run and just be pulling back from the space and just circulating. And then when there's actually people in the space, you want that fresh air, and that's when you would allow the fresh air in and
Maybe night setback mode on
Yeah.
based on your alarm schedule or something.
You're right, and then those VAV boxes that we were talking about before, and there's unoccupied set points in there, so we can coordinate what exactly you need for the different kinds of spaces. In an office, you'd probably be fine letting it go back and down to 60 and up to 8, whatever that band is, but in your actual stacks, you want to keep it a lot tighter. So we might even just set our unoccupied set points to the same as your occupied set points, and just so it's always, trying to be 70 degrees, whatever it is you're looking for.
One of the questions that we had, so I was doing the walkthrough with the person who's doing our preservation commissioning.
Yeah.
And one of the questions was around at what point can we do what to talk about possible different programming. So if you guys sort of own the system through warranty,
Yeah.
can we work with you about different programming options, or do we have to wait till it's turned over to us?
Yeah, that's a great question. So basically the question was, the user, your ability to modify what the system is doing through the warranty period and beyond. Quick answer, it's what we contractually own what was provided in the sequences, so that's what we're going to stick to.
Right.
As far as modifying set points and change, schedules and everything, that's all part of that scope. depending on the actual change in programming or sequences that you're referring to, it really just depends on how big of a change it is, really. But because we answer to the construction team and the people people assigned with making sure that's running as intended. So if we started to, if we decided to make a change right now and I made it, and then next week they're like, hey, what is this doing? Why is it? This isn't what the sequence calls for. Then it's kind of a tricky spot there. But I mean, obviously the intent is to be whatever you guys need. But unfortunately, at least at the time being, there is this contractual agreement with, the actual design of the system. So, and we would want to stay within the bounds of that anyways. We would, any change that would be great would work with MCOR or someone anyways to make sure it's, something that's you can do.
So what were the design sequences or set points, and like how granular was that information that you guys sort of built this off of?
I mean, it gets pretty specific. I mean,
It
we
does?
can,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, I'm gonna walk through each just for this. So a VAV system, a VAV box is pretty cut and paste. It's the VAV in this building is gonna be the same as the VAV in that building. This air handler is pretty unique.
Yeah.
I've never seen any air handler like this, honestly. So, so the sequence provided for this air handler is very specific.
Yeah.
So each piece of equipment is doing a very specific thing. If that answers your question.
But I guess my question is, I'm just thinking sort of down the line.
Yeah.
As we make changes, which we very likely will.
Yeah,
at some
right.
point, where do we go back to sort of design sequence?
Yeah, so there's the controls as-built that are gonna
Okay.
basically spell out flow diagrams, wiring diagrams, sequences that were the original, sequences. We've added a new, it's not on this right now, a support tab here that includes, contact information for Zenergy, contact information for whoever is, useful. And those drawings, that would be links, that would be a PDF that would pop up just like we saw before. From there, you could reference, the sequences that were the original sequences for what it was trying to do, and that support. We'll get that on there. I know that's something you guys are kind of looking for across
Which one?
that support page that just for the drawings and everything to, yeah.
So you all have like the as-built built into the.
Yeah, we like to put them right on here. We're still.
Sequence of operation.
Yeah, we're still verifying. We don't have our completed as-built because we're still in the testing phase.
Yep.
So if things are changed, we'll want to reflect that in our as-built. So they wouldn't be on here yet, but we would get those on there once we have the completed ones.
Sorry, minor question. The
Yeah.
pre-filter alarm, what determines that going into it? Is it just one that happens
It's a
every?
pressure drop.
Oh,
Yeah.
Just a couple of gauges.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, you monitor the pressure coming into the filter, the pressure going out of the filter. You measure the difference, and if that difference starts to increase, there must be something blocking the airflow. So different filters have different expected pressure drops.
I think they have number 13.
Yeah.
I guess my question is going to be what's going to be the protocol? I know we can address it later, but just to bring it up real quickly. The protocol of need to go in and address that. I need to shut it down. Do I need to alert people? How close of a window do I have to be off and on?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we'll have to work that out. I don't have a short answer, but I was gonna ask separately, and I'm sure you're going to sort of notifications and, how that happens. So like, when there's an alarm in the BMS.
Who that goes out to? Yeah,
Who it
right.
goes out to, whether it's email, text, and
Right.
how do you determine, or how much flexibility you have with that?
Yeah, I mean, whatever is useful for the user. Email capabilities, text capabilities, whichever to whoever you need them to go to, really.
And is that built into what we own through this particular package, or that's like another thing we would have to sort of purchase or explore?
That's part of the system, yeah. That's all included, yeah. One thing that we've requested on the other branches, I don't think we've received yet, is an actual email address to send out from. So the server, needs like an email account or something that would actually send the emails out and call it like a relay to send it to and do all that process. So through construction and everything, we might put our own email address in there just so that we can get alerts at, if something as the building's getting through the construction phase. But once we kind of get to this point, we want to remove ourselves from the equation and make sure that email is something that you guys own, so that it's being sent from your servers and everything. So that's something we would look for, so that we can send out emails.
Okay. But I mean, to the extent we can sort of automate that might be good, and then we sort of
Sure.
know when, something's going on.
Is there any way you can throw an hour timer on that?
Uh,
Kind of like we would do with pumps, like lead lag, just to see run time, so instead of using a date, we can say we did maintenance at 500 hours or whatever. Because I know,
oh, like an actual,
yeah.
I gotcha.
Just off a CT or something.
I mean, so these little VFD these little icons here are the VFDs. I think they have a runtime, but we don't have that built in for the air handler.
Because with the water conditioning, we have to add salt, we do carbon filters, there's a lot of maintenance here, because we do not want to have to touch that heat wheel.
Yeah, I get that.
I just want to make sure that maybe
Yeah, I mean, that's
the
something we
alarm
can.
pops up and say, whatever the manufacturer says to go in and do things.
Yeah, so just like basically a runtime and like a runtime alarm that it would Yeah, I mean, that's something we can do. That's not
Even quarterly or,
that's not too difficult. Let me grab my pen here and.
there you go, okay.
Get my wired up here. HU runtime. And then the support tab. Something else, but I'll think of it later. All right, so the basic operation of this unit is a little complicated, but it's, when you break it into parts, it's not too bad. Basic idea is that there's two supply fans that are pushing the air down into the space. Those are what's being fed directly into those VAV boxes that we looked at. Those fans are going to be pulling from a combination of return air and outside air. So your outside air is your fresh air, which would really only be during your occupied times, so that you can have fresh air in the space. Otherwise, you're just recirculating the air from the space. So as you can see here, we actually have two arrows coming into the unit. That is your return air with a damper, and your outside air with another damper. These two dampers are always going to be the inverse of one another. So if your outside air damper is closed, your return air damper should be fully open, and vice versa. If your outside damper for some reason was wide open, your return air damper should be closed. This is the balanced minimum position for this unit. So I think typically you should see this either closed or at 17%. That's just to ensure that we have the minimum outside air requirements for the space. So what happens here is these two supply fans, are pulling through both those dampers and through them and out to the space. We call this right here the mixed air because it's the mixed, basically you're mixing those two types of air, your return air and your outside air. And we have a sensor there. This is a pretty important sensor, your mixed air temperature. This is basically, this is your temperature going right into your heating coil. We talked about a freeze stat before. If this temperature gets really low, like down into 40s and below, you're at the risk of tripping your freeze stat. So typically you won't see it get too low, but if you had a failed outside air damper or something, you might see that mixed air temperature really get cold, and you don't really want to see that. We never want this really falling below like 50 degrees really. So that's the intake air. Well, let's just go through that whole thing. So basically, your mixed air comes in here, and the first thing we do is there's the filters. So we talked about how there's two filters, a pre-filter and a final filter. There's two separate differential pressures across those filters. And basically the idea is just as that pressure builds, the filter's getting dirtier and dirtier, and we want to replace them. Honestly, it's usually just done on a schedule, whether it's every month or every 2 months, whatever it is. But this is kind of just a status of saying, hey, well, maybe they forgot to change the filters or something. If these read 0, either you don't have filters in there or the sensors failed or something. But if you were to change the filters, these alarms are latched. So you'd have to come in here and hit the reset filters button, and that's going to clear this alarm. So this red background and that dirty thing is just an alarm that's triggered after the pressure being too high for an hour. So once you change the filters, you have to hit that button to clear that alarm. So we'll at least be clear for the next hour. Now the next thing we do is we preheat the air. So I think the original sequence is actually to maintain the mixed air temperature. I'm in the process of kind of clarifying that because we were just maintaining the discharge air temperature for heating, but they wanted us to look at the mixed air, but that doesn't make any sense because the mixed air is before the heating coil. So we may be changing that to maintain this next temperature, the pre-coil temperature. But basically the idea is as it gets colder outside, your incoming air is colder, you need more heat in the space, so that heating valve is going to start to open to provide more heat in the space before it hits the VAV boxes. The device, the unit here is responsible for preheating, pre-cooling, or all your cooling need, all your dehumidifying needs, but really just your first stage of heating, because your boxes in the space are going to be really going to be heating that space, because your different spaces are going to have different heating loads. The next thing we see here, there's the freeze stat. When it's the dead of winter and it's 0 degrees outside, hopefully you don't have any issues with this, but if you were ever to have outside air come in and have a heating issue, say the boilers weren't running, this is just a safety to keep things from freezing. It'll shut down the unit so we don't, have water all over the floor and cracked coils and stuff. So this is just a typical safety whenever you have a hot water coil. This wheel here, we mentioned that. This is kind of funny wheel. It's really just for, it's for reheating during dehumidification. So the idea here is in the cooling season, we're going to have this warm air coming in here, this warm mixed air temperature hitting the wheel. We're then going to cool it with what's called the pre-cooling coil here. We're basically trying to get that air nice and cold and get as much humidity out of there as possible. At which point it then hits the wheel and we heat it back up with the energy that came from the mixed air temperature. So it's just a process of wringing out the air and heating it back up.
To dry it a little more.
To dry out the air, so take some of that moisture out as the heating season is upon us. Or the summer where there's a lot of moisture in the air. During the wintertime, that wheel's not gonna run because we're not doing that. So during the wintertime, that wheel's just gonna be off and it's just gonna the air is just gonna carry on its way out into the space. So don't be alarmed if the wheel's not running off season. That's just for cooling season. Once we've reheated the air, now we have your final cooling coil, which is re-cooling the air to get down to the temperature you're looking for that actually goes and hits the VAV boxes below. So right now we're trying to get down to 50 degrees, which is admittedly pretty low. So that's why we're at this like full cooling capacity here, because we're just trying to get down to 50 degrees. Both coils are responsible for getting down to that 50 degrees, so they should both respond to that. If this post-cooling coil is doing enough to satisfy that, then this valve will remain closed as long as there isn't humidity demand. But both coils will work together to make sure that our supply air temperature is getting down to temperature. The only other piece to this unit is this EF2 up in the corner here. So this is relieving. So because our outside air damper is at 17%, we're letting in some outside air. We're building pressure in the building. So as you can see down here, we have 2 space pressure sensors, which I think is what we were looking at down on the on that 4th floor floor map, the floor plan. As we let in more air and we're not exhausting it, our pressure builds in the space. So we need to run this exhaust fan to relieve that pressure. So it's only going to run during the occupied times when we're letting in that fresh air. As your pressure increases, this fan's going to increase in speed. Hopefully it shouldn't have to run too fast. I mean, right now it's running at 50% and we don't really have much of a pressure issue. But that's what that fan is going to be doing. Even during occupied times, if for some reason, say, we got windows open, whatever it is, say there isn't a pressure demand in the space, that fan will cycle off as needed. So it's only going to run as that pressure builds. Like this fan also has like VFD information if you didn't want to go up to the VFD, too lazy to go up there or something, you can look at all the relevant information here for it, whether the fan's in hand or auto or whatever. There is a humidifier associated with this unit, HU1. That's the biggest one, kind of nestled out in the back of the mechanical room up there. You'll see that running during the winter months, humidifying the space. We're basically pre-humidifying the air entering the library. And then this damper here, there is an isolation damper on the unit itself. Not exactly sure why, but this wants to be open all the time so that you can actually send the air out.
I'm surprised they put the humidification before the post-cooling valve.
Yeah, that's a good question. I can double check to make sure that that's the
That should be
actual.
flipped, or you're just gonna pull that humidity back out.
Yeah, I'll double check to make sure that's the actual location. You wouldn't typically you wouldn't be humidifying and cooling at the same time, so I'm not sure it would matter, but I'll double check that orientation just to make sure that's how it is.
Get on the walkthrough.
Just like the filters we saw there, if the alarms are in, if the fans go into alarm, either the supply fans, the exhaust fans, the sequence is for the whole unit to shut down. So we'll command, if there's a fan failure, we'll command the fans all off, close the dampers, everything's done. You're gonna get an alarm down here, red background saying that one of the fans or all of them are in alarm. To reset that, say there was an issue with the drive that you reset, someone will then have to come to the graphics here and hit this button to reset the fan alarms, or else the unit won't come back on. And that's just kind of the only way to make sure that they wanted the unit to shut down and not start back up automatically or keep running when a fan's in alarm. other things down here that are important.
Could
So
you do it the other way? Could you reset it on the computer and then reset the drive? So that you can actually be there when the thing's starting?
the problem with that is it's just going to go back into alarm. Because you're
Well, I'm just saying so that you
Basically-
can see if there's a problem.
Could you run it in hand?
You could. Yeah, I think you might just have to have
Because our
someone
main
with you.
thing is in the basement.
Yeah,
The fans up there, up in the roof.
I see what you
I wouldn't
mean.
want to hit reset, like, and just hope for the best, you know?
No, I know. Yeah.
Which reset are you talking about now?
So
This
we need two people to do it.
this button here is to reset, to clear the alarms in the controller here. So if that fan went into alarm, if we commanded the fan on, and that relay, that status didn't come back from the VFD, the variable frequency drive controlling the fan, we're going to generate an alarm saying, yep, the fan didn't run, we have a problem. We're going to command everything off, close all the dampers. And the idea, basically the question is, can we clear the alarm first before we go and clear the alarm at the VFD?
Maybe we should get a dedicated tablet to go off the VPN
Yeah.
to go work. in
Yeah, or
conjunction
bring
with this.
some type of a laptop up there or something, you know?
Yeah.
The only problem is if you were to reset the alarm before actually resolving the issue, within 10 seconds it's just going to go into alarm
You
again.
may not know what the issue is unless you
Well,
drive around. for
Yeah.
The static pressures, alarms up there, those are all manual, everything's manual in the unit.
You
Yep.
won't be able to figure it out, maybe.
Yeah.
maybe,
Yeah.
Put a workstation up there or something.
That might be good, yeah. Um, so we talked about the temperature, space pressure, any of these set points. So basically what's happening with the discharge air temperature of the unit, as your outside air temperature increases, so as we go from 65 degrees up to 75 degrees, we're going to start resetting our supply air temperature down. So basically the idea is when we're in the cooler months, 65 degrees and below, we're preheating the air up to that 60-degree air, which is, it's just neutral air going to the boxes, and then the boxes are responsible for reheating it with their reheat coil. But as the temperature starts to increase outside, and we know that the temperature coming into the unit is going to be warmer, we're going to reset our supply air temperature down to 50 degrees, which is what we're at right now, because we're above, well, we're right at 75 degrees outside air, up in the corner here, 75. If I was to change, typically what we would recommend is only modifying these temperatures, the supply air temperatures, slightly. You definitely don't want to provide too much heat down to the space from the unit, because then you're going to start overheating spaces. If it's really cold in the spaces, 50 degrees too low, and because a lot of these boxes are constant volume, you might have to bump up that 50 up to 52, 55 degrees to cool with. If you find, I mean, honestly, it might be best to just leave these as is. I mean, it's basically just that when do you start resetting the temperature. The dew point, so this pre-cooling coil is actually, I think we got to get that on the graphic here. It's actually maintaining dew point, so it's a combination of temp and humidity, but it's also looking at the supply air temperature sensor, which I think is what it's typically maintaining, controlling, because that temperature is so low, 50 degrees. When the unit, this box temp set point, if the freestat were to trip, it would just maintain this 80 degrees in the unit just to keep some heat. So it would basically open the valve wide open. But then once we hit 80 degrees in the unit, that valve would dial back. Honestly, I'm not sure what this is. might have to clarify this one when I'll review this and clarify what that set point is, because that doesn't really preheat cool set point. Doesn't really make any sense. Any questions, any concerns with this, with the air handler? I know it's a lot to take in. It's kind of a lot to look at on a graphic, but the idea, yeah, go
I
ahead.
have a question on the bottom left where it says outside air.
Yeah.
Is the temperature and humidity the outside, or is that at some point in the system?
This controller that's actually controlling this air handler doesn't have its own outside air temperature and humidity sensor. So it's being mapped from the global system, the graphics. It's actually wired to the chiller controller. So that is outside, yes, on the roof. And then it's being mapped to this device that's controlling the air
You
handler.
get that changed to the,
So it's going to match exactly.
But shouldn't it, it's 20% higher.
That's a really good question.
because if it's the global off the tracer summit or whatever, it's kind of water tower, and that's why. I mean,
No, that's a really good question. I'll double check that. Yeah, I didn't notice that.
and if
Our
instead of
outside
going-
air appears 20% off the one at the unit, yeah.
Instead of going from Logan,
Yeah.
you're better off to grab the global temperature from Fenway, because there is a weather station there.
We're not using the Logan temperature to do anything. It's just the weather that you're looking at on the homepage. The sensor up there is our sensor on site.
Oh, okay.
The one up on the corner here. I see what you mean though with the humidity. I'll double check that. Those you should see those match. I see what you're saying here. Yeah, we're not actually using this to control anything. The humidity outside. It's really just the outside air temperature that is the important one for this. But yeah, it's important that it makes sense.
And just following up on what Ed was asking, when we're looking at trend reports
Yep.
of what, like, the outside conditions are doing, that's pulling from that, it's not pulling from Logan?
That's going to be for just this system, exactly. Yep.
Do you know where the sensor is up there?
I was just looking at the chiller has its own sensor. It's up there around the chiller and the air handler.
Nice to know where it is.
Yeah,
If there's an issue.
we can get eyes on that. Mm.
Okay, thank you.
Because technically, you gotta read a higher temperature up on the roof and the radiation from the rubber on the roof versus like walking on the sidewalk. It's two totally different animals.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So unfortunately, we got our outside air and boom, it's already 10 degrees hotter than what it is outside.
Yeah, because it's up there, exactly. Anything else for the air handler?
Is there any lighting in this control? Or is everything local for lighting up there?
That's all local lighting, yeah. As far as
Switches on the wall?
nothing's integrated into this system, yeah.
What about like energy usage or anything like that for
No.
chiller?
I mean, there are energy values that we can trend for the VFDs and the chiller. If that's, we can do that. It's something that we're responsible for totalizing and then displaying in one place, but the information's there. We're communicating with the VFDs. So you have your overall kilowatt, your energy usage. I think we're getting a kilowatt hour value from the chiller as well, but we can double check that. So all the VFDs are, I'm pretty sure, the same model, so they all have the same points for the pumps, the fans. So kind of going back to our exercise before, when you went to a VAV, the space was hot, there was no airflow. Well, maybe there was airflow, but the temperature was hot. So you went to the air handler, see what it's doing. you came here and the fans are running great, everything seems fine. These two coils are full blue and 100%, but your temperature is 80 degrees. Well, you probably have a chilled water problem. So you either have a problem with your chiller that's designated just for this, or we're not pulling chilled water from the rest of the building. So at that point, I would go to chiller graphic, which you can go right at the top there, go into chiller. And this is another kind of complicated, semi-unique system where we basically have two ways of getting chilled water to that air handler. We can either use the the specific chiller for it right next to the air handler up on the roof. They're just side by side. Or we can pull chilled water from, well, technically not pull, but use the chilled water from the rest of the building and try and cool the space. The only reason we would do that is if the chiller is being serviced or if there's an issue with it. If it goes into alarm and starts running, we switch over to this heat exchanger, which it looks like it's kind of the same size as the chiller. It's actually pretty small up there. Actually, that might be.
Is there a parameter where it just takes over on its own, or does it have to be a see a failure?
It's not, there's no sequence based on temperature or anything. If,
Can we toggle it?
yep, we could do that. So basically in auto, if we enable the chiller, but we don't get status from it in a given amount of time, we switch to the heat exchanger, or if we get a fault, some kind of alarm that's going to keep it from running, we switch to the heat exchanger. So to know what mode we're in, it's the same kind of status box in the bottom here. So system enable is basically, is the system enabled? Are we calling the pumps to run? Are we calling the chiller to run? Do we need chilled water at the air handler? This should read enabled. That's going to be automatically set based on outside air. So as actually outside air and demand from the chiller. By default, we're going to be in the chiller mode. So that's what we're in right now. So our status here is we're looking for cooling from the chiller. If I came here and I said, well, we really want to, I'm going to have to change these texts here. I know what they mean, but you guys don't. Change chiller text.
Why, John, could we cover for run time for hours between the lead lag on the pumps?
Yeah, I think that is something that we definitely calculate, and it's just not on here. Here we are. It is 442
great.
and 577. Yeah, and you can reset that. I think. So this text, when you actually click it, after I update it, it'll read either override to use chiller or use heat exchanger. What'll happen then is, depending on which mode we're in, it'll open the associated valves and switch from flowing the water through the chiller or flowing the water through the heat exchanger. So that is user, this is just that user command. And this status is going to be what are we trying to do right now. If we get a failure from the chiller, or if it doesn't start to run, we'll get this chiller mode failure will turn active, and that's what's actually going to drive it to switch to heat exchanger cooling. And yeah, we have a totally different humidity sensor here, so I'll coordinate all those and get I don't know where all these are coming from, but I'll figure that one out. Outside air and chiller graphic. So basically the idea here is we have our pumps feeding. Usually I put arrows here, and we'll do that. These two pipes here, the light blue and kind of dark blue are your pipes going to and from the air handler. So that's the actual chilled water that's cooling the air handler. The pumps pull the water back and either send it up to the chiller to get cooled down or through that heat exchanger to get cooled down. So on system start, what we're going to do is, whether we're looking to run the chiller or the heat exchanger, we're going to open the valves associated with that. So they're called isolation valves. There's 2 of them for both systems on the 2 pipes. So right now we're opening the chill water valves. Once those prove open, we say, yep, we have path for flow through the chiller, we can run the pumps. Then the pumps will enable. Once we've had the pumps running for a minute, I think it's a minute or 2, that's when we'll actually enable the chiller and the chiller will start to run.
Is there a proof of flow switch on the graphic anywhere?
The chiller has its own
Okay.
flow switch, which is this evaporated water flow status. I might just move that over here to like the temperature. Yeah, and the pipe coming up to it, you can see it underneath there. It's one of those like LED like
Oh, great.
switches. You can see how much flow there is, and there's the red marker for when if you drop below that, it trips out pretty quickly. So if there's any issue with the pumps or there's no flow for it, it trips off pretty immediately.
You need to run both pumps at the same time? Just maybe because of load.
I think through the summer, yeah, probably. That pre-cooling valve's a lot bigger than the other valve. And as that starts to, as we're doing all that flow, yeah, you pretty much need, the chiller's fine using just 1 pump. Where I was kind of messing around with it today is how many valves are open. It's only those valves. So if those start to close, you're losing all that flow regardless of what the pump's doing, and the chiller can trip off. So the pumps, depending on the demand though, the pumps you may only have 1 pump running. If that pump's running at 100% for a set amount of time, a couple of minutes, the second pump will kick on and they'll maintain this, they'll run together, and then
I just don't want to be
as the
long,
demand.
2 pumps are running, 1 pump's not.
Yeah, right.
It's all in the sequence, great.
Yep, it's all in the sequence here. So, there's this lag pump is being called on. The idea with the pumps is similar to those fans. We're monitoring the pressure across the pipes going to the air handler. So as that pressure, we want to keep that pressure at a certain point so we can verify that we have enough flow to cool with. As that pressure starts to drop, we're losing flow. So we need to ramp the speed up on the pumps to make sure that pressure stays. If 1 pump can't cut it, we kick on the second pump.
There's no way it tells you what the GPM is?
We don't have a flow sensor on that system, no. You'd think we would, I know. We don't. We do have
You said the flow switch has something.
we have a flow switch at the chiller.
Chiller that says something.
There is a flow meter on the building side of the heat exchanger. That's it. So yeah, the valves open or pumps start. Once the valves are open, enable the chiller, and hopefully it runs down to its set point of 44 degrees, and we get the cooling we need down to the air handler. If there's an issue with the chiller, or if you want to service it or something, we would disable the chiller, wait a little bit of time, make sure, let the flow let it do its shutdown process. Then we'll open the valves to the heat exchanger. Once those are proven open, close the valves to the chiller. Now we're flowing through the heat exchanger and we're getting cooling from the rest of the system. There is a modulating valve supplying the other side of the heat exchanger. That is going to modulate open and closed to maintain your supply temp here going out to the air handler. From what I've seen, that's going to stay wide open because I don't know if that heat exchanger just not a lot of flow, or from what I've seen, that valve pretty much stays 100% to bring this down to, but I guess right now we're looking for 41. I'm not sure if that's what the design is, so I'll double check that. But even so, it wasn't getting down below 50, which is what the chiller's trying to do.
We usually don't go any lower than 44 on the chill
Yeah.
water. And the pressure will vary between how many house system pumps are running.
I'll make sure that's set to the design set point there, that temperature. Yeah, and then that's kind of the idea with the heat exchanger. So that there's that valve here that's going to modulate and cool the heat exchange, the water going across the other side of the heat exchanger, so we don't need to use the chiller if needed. There's no situation where you're going to have both the heat exchanger and the chiller operating. So it's either one or the other.
You would want to know if there's a bypass in case you have to work on the water bundle. On the chiller, on the roof chiller, if there's a bypass.
Bypass on the chiller. I couldn't tell you if there's if there's a manual one. There's no control valve on a bypass. That's all I would know. You'd have to check the piping drawings. That's kind of tight up in the ceiling there, but there wasn't one at the chiller that I was looking at, and we don't have a control valve.
Well, what I'm saying is, when you pick up the house system and the roof chiller's off,
Yeah.
there's still gonna be chilled water flowing through the evaporator bundle on the absorber, on the rooftop, right? Or is it just going right to the coils?
Are you saying to the chiller?
So from the heat exchanger,
Yeah.
we're giving you cool, chilled water from,
Yeah.
it's still being circulated through the chiller.
Once we've proven that these valves open, we're going to close the isolation valves to the chiller.
Okay, that
So
was.
you won't.
Yeah.
So you won't have flow to the
Yeah.
chiller. Yeah, when we're just going to the heat exchanger. Yeah, you'll be isolated up above from
Yeah, I was just
those
thinking
valves.
of the word on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As far as that pump lead lag, so yeah, we are monitoring the runtime for the pumps as I think every 150 hours, which is roughly a week. As the runtime for the lead pump increases 150 hours over the other pump, we cycle the lead. The lead is just going to be the one that's going to stay on all the time versus the one that's going to cycle on and off to make up the difference for the pressure. When both pumps are running, you're going to see them both running at the same speed, just working together to maintain that pressure, that differential pressure set point of 13. And then when the other one pump kicks off, you're just going to have one pump maintaining that pressure. There's a glycol tank up there. We just have an alarm contact on it. So if that starts to get low, if that system goes into alarm, you have an alarm for that. All these points are going to be trended and viewable back in time. Any questions about the chilled water system? Okay. While we're going through this list up here, I think there were a couple other exhaust fans. So they're EF1. I have to put a label on that so that you guys know what that actually is. I don't know if that's supposed to be following the schedule or what.
EF1, is that tied to the rooftop?
No, the rooftop's actually EF2. EF1. Oh, EF1 is tied to I'll put a label on there. It's tied to the smoke removal post-purge system. So after an event, God forbid you have like a fire or anything, after that, you go to the smoke removal panel and basically EF1 sucks the air out of the system using the same ductwork as the air handler. It's this kind of like crazy smoke damper system. There's a panel, post-purge panel in the Fire Command Center. That's what EF1 is for. So basically you'll never see EF1 run ever. EF2 is for your, yeah, right. EF2 is the air handler. EF3 is basically the lab exhaust for that conservation room. So there's a fume hood and an exhaust damper, and that's EF3 is what's actually pulling the air out of that space.
Are those controlled by timers?
It's controlled.
EMS, or is it occupation? An occupied area?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, if we can, would that space be 24/7 exhaust, or would it just be
It'd be a waste of energy to just be pulling conditioned air.
on a
Nobody
schedule?
would.
Well, doesn't it have a local split?
Well, that's what I'm asking, is it
Yeah.
local? 'Cause
Split the split?
I think the determination during our discussions was that it would always be on because the chemicals are below the.
Are in the
Yeah.
hood. So you
Yeah.
always need that exhaust pulling out.
Yeah,
Okay, so
Right.
it's a 24/7 type of thing, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, but we can make that, like, we can make that determination too, we don't have to leave it on. It was just the engineers maybe for safety reasons, were like, just do it this way.
Typically on a lab exhaust system, yeah, because you're storing chemicals or something you don't know when anyone's going to be using it. Unfortunately, we don't have a switch or anything tied to it, so we wouldn't know when someone wants it on or not. It's just assumed it's always on. Obviously, that's something that can always be added. It's adding a switch isn't a big deal, but we just need to get tied back to the system to know that, we're
It's just
calling
good-
for this
it's
to
good
run.
to know if I'm walking past something and it's not
Yeah.
running, I need,
Yeah, so you should basically,
normal or not normal.
effectively what this, and we might need to actually put it on here, this fan is really actually modulating based on the space pressure, just like EF2 is. I should have it on the graphic here. EF3 space pressure in that room. EF4 and 5 are really just doing space temperature control. So they are I'm gonna have to put it, this must be serving a specific room, like an electrical closet or something, but these just cycle on and off as needed to cool like a electrical closet or something. So unless this space, room 411, and whichever space this is serving, if these spaces get hot, the fan will kick on. Obviously, as you can see here, purple background means that it's overridden. Someone's come in here and turned this on. Possibly could have been us, the mechanical contractor will call us all the time and say, hey, we're balancing this equipment. The balancer needs this fan running so they can check airflows and stuff, and looks like someone didn't put a timer in there. So just while we're here, honestly, I'm just let's clear that. So
Lauren, I heard something about a cold room,
yeah,
The vault is a cool storage
the
room.
vault, and that is in the 4th floor. Does it have its own graphic? Or is it just part of the floor plan? There's a cold room on the 4th floor.
yeah, the cold storage
Yeah, is
space.
does it have its own room and alarms? Or is
Yep,
it just-
that has its own graphic. Yeah, so that is what room is that?
419.
The 1-3, the red humidity on the right, 38%. 419.
Oh yeah, right here. So it's not very cold in there. So this has a dedicated
Humidifier.
humidifier and what does ADU stand for? It's not what I expected it to stand for. But it's basically a dedicated unit for this space. I'm not sure why it's overridden off right now. I think they had an issue with this unit right now, and they're correcting that. It should be cooling the space, but it wasn't. And also,
Is it off the chiller?
I'm assuming based off cold storage that this is supposed to be a colder room. So we really want these set points to be lower than 70s. So we're talking like 65, 60, 60?
Yeah, I would have to look again, but that sounds right.
Okay. So because of that, that's actually below our minimum cool set point. So I have to change that down. I'll change it down to 55 because you guys might want to try and get colder down there. That's really not going to have any effect on, honestly, as far as what you're looking at here, you really care about the heating set point, which sounds like you never really want to be heating in this space. This VAV damper, because it's constant volume, it actually is just air being dumped in from that air handler, but it's never actually actively cooling the space. The VAV controller isn't. They just have this reheat on here to heat as needed, which we don't want open, even though there's no heat in the pipes anyway, so we're not really heating in there. But that ADU should be enabled because it's responsible for basically maintaining that space, and we're really just providing fresh air to it. As you see here, it says no DDC. We really have no integration to that unit. All we do is just enable or disable it, which is what you see here. But I believe they were having an issue with this that may or may not be resolved that I'll have to find out about as to why this isn't running. But your only real status to the space would be verifying that, yeah, it's cold in there. But as far as what this ADU is doing, we can't tell it one way or the other. We can't say, hey, go to 60 degrees, go to... So that would really have to come from the mechanical contractor about how that thing's running. I think this will update. If you notice, our heating and cooling always have to be a minimum of 2 degrees, so I changed the cooling. The heating came along for the ride. I do think this is gonna let's change this now. It doesn't really. So I gotta find out about that, the ADU.
Quick question, what's that, BAC-9001, is that just part of the system?
This is the controller type.
Okay.
I think that was copied from a different job or something, but all the controls that we have in here, the actual physical mechanical controls that are trying to, the VAV controllers or the controllers for the air handlers, it's by a company called KMC,
Yep.
and that's just their model number for the controller. So it's a BAC BACnet controller. 9001 is the type. 9001 is going to be a VAV controller, whereas the other ones are going to be 5901s. But it doesn't really have much importance to you guys, honestly. All right, so I'll find out what's going on here with this ADU. I think there was another. The lab was kind of a room that we're a unique space that we'd want to look at. That's 415, which should be in a different place in the floor plan. So this is another kind of unique graphic, just because this is that conservation lab we were talking about, where we have an exhaust fan pulling from your lab exhaust and general exhaust in the space, and then the supply VAV. This is one of the only VAVs boxes that is not constant volume. So this will modulate up and down as needed in the space to provide heating and cooling. It appears that this one doesn't have a reheat coil. That might not be true, but I thought they all had reheat coils, but I'll double check that one too. I got a lot of notes here. If the next time you look at it, it doesn't have a reheat coil, it doesn't have a reheat coil. But I would think that it would, just because it's responsible for heating and cooling that space. VAVB reheat coil. We don't have a lot of integration to the actual hood itself. You really just have basically an alarm to know if that, if you're in there and you open up that hood all the way and the velocity drops too low, it's gonna start yelling at you. And that alarm is gonna come down here. That's effectively the extent of our integration to the hood system. That was all that was really provided. What we do know is how much airflow is being pulled out. And like I said before, that EF3 is maintaining space pressure in the room, which is actually on this graphic, but we don't have a set point. So I'll do the same here. I think that's kind of the extent of the unique spaces. Otherwise, it's pretty all similar. There are a couple boxes, VAV boxes, that serve multiple offices. I think that one we were looking at first actually is one of them, where it's actually it's 3 offices and they're all fed by one box. Any questions about any of that? Kind of anything we've seen so far? I think at this point we're going to shift to more of the, schedules, the histories, kind of look at all those just so we have it, so you guys see it and have it on camera here. But before we kind of go to those, any questions about like mechanical sequences, workings, or you can think of?
Negative, so that's good.
Yep. Okay. All right, so we'll carry on here. First tab here that we see, schedules. There's really just gonna be, we can break it out into multiple schedules if needed. Right now we just have a place which isn't gonna be very dissimilar to what is gonna happen moving forwards. As far as the scheduler itself is concerned, it's pretty straightforward. All of these are selectable fields that you can drag and change. So if I say I wanted, say I wanted a schedule that started at 6 a.m. and stopped at 6 p.m., I could set my Monday schedule. I can right-click on this and apply it to the rest of the week, Monday through Friday. I can copy a day, hit here, hit copy and paste, and set my whole week to be the same. If you notice any of these fields that aren't set, by default, that's just going to be unoccupied. So you don't have to specify unoccupied times. You just are really just specifying when you're occupied. And also, this is just your general weeks. So your 52 weeks in the year, this is the starting point for it. Once we have this starting point, then we're going to factor in, special events, all that kind of stuff. But this is where we're starting from. For the time being, since we didn't really receive anything and we knew that we're trying to just keep the space tempered, we just left it just occupied 24/7. What would happen when we go unoccupied is we relax the temperature set points a little bit, but that fan will keep running, the equipment will keep running, just with that not bringing in that outside air. So that's our weekly schedule. I modified it because of that. Nothing actually changes until I actually hit save. So you come up here and hit save, or I think if you change the page, it'll prompt you, hey, you didn't save, you need to save. The next tab is here in this scheduler is special events. So this is where you would specify, holidays and any kind of special thing that would happen in the space that's unique to that's outside the realm of. You wouldn't necessarily want to put in the weekly schedule because it's really only 1 week or it's really only once a month. This is pretty intuitive. I mean, if you've used the whole scheduler is pretty intuitive. If you use a scheduler anywhere, you probably, or honestly, if you've used the NAG or supervisor system, you're probably pretty familiar with it. To create a special event, you right-click here, or you hit this green button here and hit Add. You can name the event whatever you want. And there's a bunch of different ways to define these events, and it might just take kind of playing around with this, how to best do what you need to do. Personally, I always usually go, I think, custom, and you can kind of like select multiple things, and it's kind of the more powerful way to do it, but depending on what the application is, there's multiple different ways to do this. So say we did have a specific event on Tuesday, June 10th, I can specify that here, create that event. Now it's in my special events page. The next step, when you create a special event, the next step is to define what actually happens on that event. If you don't do that, nothing's going to happen. So I have to come over here to this gray box over here and actually say that, during that event, I actually want the whole day to go unoccupied, which is false for this text purposes here. You can, if I don't specify anything, it's just going to revert back to the weekly schedule or whatever other event it takes place. And again, you have to hit save when you make any changes. The order of events in this list is like a priority scheme. So the top event is going to take priority if for some reason you had things overlapping. But say you set up something for every Tuesday or every Monday, but then you also have Memorial Day in there, and the top one's going to take precedence. That's all. Another feature that you can see here, if you click on an actual event, you'll see it populate up here in this bold lettering. So just the 10 is bolded up here. If I hit holidays, just holidays are going to be in bold. Oh, maybe I lied to you. I thought so. Maybe it's just all special.
You have to save it.
Maybe just all.
Purple.
That's probably a good point. Yeah. There's also a summary tab here where you can go to any day and just see what that day looks like. For the most part, this is all going to look pretty much the same. But as you can see, if you did have special events defined or different things, you click on a day, you're going to see what happens on that day, just to make sure that it's taking my schedule. We have a couple of tabs up here, but I think I'm just going to delete them and just keep it to this, basically what I just showed you right there, where you would just define holidays and any special events just through that. If there is a common schedule object or something that you guys use in this, if the scheduling is going to get done through that top level supervisor, that other, the system that communicates to all the branches, then this is going to have to get tweaked. But basically, this is how it would be done through just this system.
Dave, you might have asked this earlier. You don't control any lighting on those floors, right? Through this energy system? Yeah. So this is all going to be 24 hours.
Okay. All right. Any questions about scheduling or this one schedule is going to go to all the devices unless you guys need otherwise. For the time being, that's how it's set. It can always be broken out into more, but because it's just one air handler, it's basically just one big space, that would follow a single schedule. The next tab up here, nope, I'm not going to save. The next tab is the alarm log. So we saw some alarms earlier, things that were in alarm state. They all get sent to this alarm log. There's a few different alarm logs. One is for critical alarms. That's basically if you had a fan failure, if you had a pump failure, anything, your major system, basically the alarms that we were talking about earlier, the email alarms would come here to the critical alarm page. And those would get emailed out to the necessary people who want to get those alarms or who are told they have to get those alarms. All your other alarms are going to come to this general alarm page. And it appears, this page kind of takes a bit to load, and because of the time, because of our connection speed, it's kind of not really populating very quickly. I might have to try and reload it.
When are the books going in?
Don't know,
Oh, okay.
we still need shelving.
As soon as the shelving goes in, you know it.
Okay. I was just curious.
Where do you
I am too.
To be determined.
where are the books right now? They just
They're in a secret location.
undisclosed location. Yeah.
Can't leave the room.
Yeah. Right.
That's a very suspicious question, Tom.
I was just curious, like, how do you guys care for them when they're not in the space where they're supposed to be cared for? Yeah, right. I don't know, but
Carefully.
I'm assuming they're not just in storage box across the street, or
Maybe they are.
They're not at the
you'll never know.
store,
So,
you're saying.
yeah.
Dave, did you get my email?
All right, we got some connection.
We'll be able to
Oh, no, I
actually
sent you the
stop
email
looking
about
at this
the-
stuff on
the thing you
our end.
asked
Just
for.
after you integrate with the library system.
Yeah, that's like I was talking to you the other day. We're kind of
I asked about
trying to figure out that for each branch, just that whole get you guys into it, giving you access, because it does kind of suck doing this training, and then if you don't use it anytime soon, you're gonna lose everything. But soon, I'd say soon. I know we're moving on integrating to Atoms. I know that one's a hot one. I mean, this one is as well, but we're just getting to a point where we're going to have access to do everything we need to, so pretty soon. All right, let's see what the alarm page. It's a little slower on the web, so I'm just going to open up my software just to show you what, I guess, the alarms would kind of look like. So it's going to look a little different here just because this is the software is a little different, but the idea is the same. If you've used the system for a really long time, maybe you're actually familiar with this kind of look too, but basically all I'm looking for is to see those humidity alarms come in, but it's just being really slow.
In an act state, we used to get notes all the time saying, so blah, blah, blah is unact.
It's just, it's the acknowledgement. So basically, anytime you get an alarm come in, the way the system is set up is, users should come in and acknowledge it and say, yeah, I saw that alarm. And
Okay,
the little red bell will turn to a little yellow bell.
so it's just a way to say somebody's.
It's just a way to say, yep, I recognize, yep, it's all good. The more what you should really care about is whether it's an alarm or not an alarm. Those are the big ones. So I'm not sure why this is taking so long, honestly, but I'm gonna just try and let this load. And, well, actually, I don't think I can do anything. Let's look at something else first, and then we'll go back to the alarms, see if that loads. This graphic is pretty simple. It's really just for, routine maintenance of the system. It's just to create a backup of the site, basically everything you're looking at, this database, and store a backup on my local computer. Just kind of it's good to have someone who does it routinely, just to keep a record of, just in case something happens with the device. It's not a backup of all the controllers everywhere. It's just a backup of the BMS, the Niagara software. Niagara is the framework, the software that we use to display the graphics. Looks like I'm having troubles with this too.
Tom, what?
Must be the
what was
libraries.
last time you did that?
This is pretty much it. I'm just kind of going through the extra thing. I was going to look at the histories again one more, because I've gotten a few questions about the histories. But I'm pretty much getting to and the users. The users are a big one, just to create new users. As you can see, so this page is pretty simple. You just hit backup. Eventually, if your speed's a little quicker and you're not on a couple of VPNs, you'll get a pop-up window saying, yeah, backup, and you save it to your own computer. And I forget if it uses like your same download structure as your browser or whatever, but it's a pretty standard thing.
Now, do your JSONs dump memory to keep them fresh and getting clogged and glitchy?
Yeah, we don't store histories for too long just because of that. The system in general does that on its own, routinely. Yeah, dumps memory.
Use your refresh rate like on the planes, is that like how often does that ping back and forth?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a separate thing, but
Gotcha.
yeah. All right, so I think this is just an issue with my connection speed, and this thing got disconnected here. But the general idea is, just a way to save it. The last tab here is the users. We might actually probably add some users now. This is kind of the biggest piece that we have left to talk about. Unfortunately, this is a kind of common thing with these training sessions, because we're trying to connect to a site from a conference room, but we're nowhere near the actual. But I don't be pretty uncomfortable if we all just held around my laptop up in the penthouse. So it's a little nicer sitting here, but. So the user page here. So this is where we create new users, or delete users, or modify user settings. There are really 3 levels of user, at least in our system. I'm not sure what's done in the other system. Like an admin, which has that emergency override capability and can really do anything with the users and everything. An operator, which is just someone who's going to come in and tweak set points here and there, but not really using the system to its fullest extent. Doesn't have all the rights. And then read only, which is someone who just, at the front, who can just log in and just, view everything. And if there's an issue or something, make a call or something. Let me see here. I thought with this duplicate button. I'm not sure what's going on here. These buttons are grayed out. They're not letting me. Sorry for the technical difficulties here. Let's see if I can bring it up here too. Basically, it's two ways to kind of create a new user. You can either create one from scratch or duplicate an existing one. Typically, I like to duplicate an existing one because it kind of brings all those other settings that you don't want to change every single time you create a new user along for the ride, as long as it's the right kind of user, so read-only account or an operator account.
So when do you ask for our information after everything's integrated?
Yeah, I mean, that's up to you guys if you want us to, if you want to basically provide a list and we just input it all in there, or I would say we could do it right now, but all of a sudden my connection's gotten pretty bad. So it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to maybe do that right now. But if you were, yeah, if you had just a list of basically everyone who would be in there, what level, if they're admin, operator, or read-only, and some kind of...
If you get a read-only, can you pull trends from read-only?
You should still be able to see the trends, yeah. Yeah.
Like that's cool.
Yeah. Since that was having a hard time, I'm going to go and...
That might be, I know there's a wonky connection on the table.
Well, while we're talking about trends, let's see if I can... The way we have the trend set up is just by equipment. So,
What about like space temperatures?
yeah, so well, it's going to be sorted by like the equipment type and then the space temperature for that. So you would basically need to know, you'd go to a room, say room 415. Oh, I'm at VAVB, so I'd go that trend. I would want to come here and pull up more detailed trends. So I would want, well, let me look at the space temp. So I'll double click on the space temp. And it's going to give me the trend for that for the last 24 hours. And if I want to compare that to my discharge air in the room, just drag that point onto here and I can see, all right, well, there's like 65 in there for the whole day, and I was discharging like 55. So that kind of makes sense. There's no way to really heat the space. I can also see what, if we were occupied. Yep, we were occupied the whole time. If this point turned off, it would be like a lighter purple, just to represent it, but it was the same thing. I can also come up here and kind of like turn off points to make it just a little more readable. The main system ones would probably be what you're maybe looking for, like what was the air handler doing at any given time, or that kind of thing. So if maybe I want to look at mixed air temp versus supply air temp on the air handler. So basically we got a lot of points being trended, and you just basically the idea you come over here, you go to histories in this little sub menu, and they're kind of sorted out. You kind of have to find what you're looking for, but the points should be there somewhere, and you can create a trend.
No more hobo.
Oh, we're gonna still have hopeless, we're gonna have more, we're gonna have more.
I'm gonna go buy stock in hobo.
Right now is the time.
How do we see
Hobo.
the, like a room's general temperature or humidity, not part of the equipment?
Just for the room?
Yeah, like in the stacks, there was like two different, points where it said the temperature and humidity.
Yeah, you would.
And then there were several that just said temperature.
So yeah, all those temperatures are here. These stack temps
Okay.
is what we're calling them, and
The
if we
Floor plan.
yeah if we
Remember what one that
if
was?
we change yeah exactly if we change these the descriptors, yeah, we can get those updated here. If it's, I'm not sure how you have them, how you would have them labeled.
I guess probably when you figure out what you want to call each space, and you already know what they're calling it by
Yeah.
column or by blueprint, and then we can just get a list, and then we
And
can
just
change them.
change it so that it'll be
Like
updated
M4
here.
is gonna be an administrator on the priority there, or on the user, so we would be able to make all those changes if we needed to.
Yeah, really.
Because it might not happen right away.
Yeah, it might be
You know,
6 months
things will
around, who
change.
knows?
Yeah, and then things will change over time.
Things always
because
change, yeah.
Everything changes.
Exactly.
Where are the temperature sensors? They're in, like, are they visible in the space or are they in the unit?
Yeah, they're right there, exactly, yeah. Yeah, these temperatures are just, I want to say they're metal wall plates.
Okay.
They might be plastic. I'm pretty sure they're metal wall plates. And then anything that has like the adjust. I usually like to do kind of like a walkthrough training, part of the training too, but we were just in this conference room. The adjustable thermostats are like a,
I saw those
yeah,
in real life. I
right.
just wasn't sure if everything.
Yeah,
The
you'll,
sensors look like a chrome plate, so.
exactly,
Yeah, you wouldn't
yeah.
know it was there until you
Right.
know it's there.
Until you recognize it and you're like, oh, these are all these
So
sensors.
you're gonna take me through and be like,
Sure.
that's the one. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Then we can put our hand on it, and if we have a tablet, and read it live time.
They heat it up.
You heat up. And
Okay.
then and then you can confirm that, yes, that's the one I want labeled as such and such. You can use a label maker and just put it right onto the,
Okay.
yeah, we can make a label maker blank, quadrant, ABC, or whatever.
Awesome. Okay.
And then we won't have to deal with like book 3.1100. Because that, you must lose your mind.
Look between these two ranges.
Yeah, the Dewey Decimal System.
We still have to deal with that, just not.
I
when it comes
understand,
to
not when it
finding
comes to
the
simple
temperature.
temperatures, yeah.
So I guess it wants to work now. So for some reason, it's not working in the web. So I'll look into that. But it's basically the same thing here.
Ransomware.
Yeah, right. No, it's a very secure system here. So like I was saying, the best way to kind of typically, I find the easiest is just to duplicate an existing user that has the same rights. Otherwise, you can come in here and hit new. And I just want to make one new user. And so the name is that like username. So basically what you would use to log in, which I can make someone's, make yours right now if you want.
Sure.
Can, for MCOR, can we just have one?
Yeah, that's fine. As long as if that's what you typically have everywhere.
That's fine,
And
it's usually only me and Ed.
Yeah.
Mostly, especially for this, it'll be only 3 of us, so the same user is fine.
yeah, this full name is, some of these stuff are generally just for reference, like for if you want to put someone's full name in here. I'll just put your name in here. What's your last name, Ed?
Bebo, B-I-B, E-A-U.
This enabled is whether the account's active right now or not. You could disable an account, but leave it in there. Typically, if you were in a disable account, you probably just delete it. you can set user accounts to expire. So say you just want to give someone access for a month and then don't want them to be able to log in after a month. This enabled will go disabled in a month basically, but the account will stay there. This is where you set the actual, the permissions for that user. So you guys would be really, well, honestly, just an admin. I'm not sure what the difference between admin and site admin is we have here. I'll just call you admin. That's basically, they call it a super user in the system. It's the highest level user. The auto log off can be kind of annoying if you sit at your desk all day and you just want the graphics up there all the time, but it keeps logging you off. You can disable that. By default, it auto logs you off in 15 minutes.
Can we make that an hour?
Yeah, we can do that. It's usually good to have something in there. You not use the default. Just so,
Yeah.
say you walked away from your
Walk away,
computer,
yeah.
someone else walks up and starts clicking, it's just for a safety measure, or usually it's good to have something in
All you
there.
have to do is hit X and it'll lock you out anyway, right?
Yeah, right. This network user doesn't mean anything. These fields don't have any use for you guys. This will keep the same. The password field is important. So for password strength, you have to have a minimum of 10 characters, capital letter, lowercase letter, and a number. I'm just going to put in a default one for now. And what's going to happen is the first time you log in, it's going to prompt you to reset it. That's what we do on most accounts. Just if we create a new account for someone, give it a generic password, and then the first time they log in. So I'll just put in, I'll just put in capital P password 123. I don't know if you want to write it down or something there. Capital P password 123. Well, it depends how long, when, and we can always go back in and reset this. This isn't. So that setting that I was just talking about is, I don't actually see here.
Password what? 1, 2, 3, 4?
I actually did 1, 2, 3, but I can do 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's a setting in
It's
here.
not a new phone. It's not as easy as passwords, just think.
Yeah, there you go.
200 things.
So I'm-
1, 2, 3, 4 or 1, 2, 3?
Capital P password 1, 2, 3, 4.
No space.
No speed.
He said 1, 2, 3.
Well, and Ed said 4, so I was like, oh, if you remember 4, then capital P password 1, 2, 3, 4.
It's an even type of.
Yeah. 4 is to reset at next login, so I'm going to check that. So when you log in the first time, it's going to prompt you, hey, reset your password. And then it won't prompt you ever to do that again. You can set people's passwords to expire routinely. Probably not that useful for you, but that's separate from the user actually expiring. It's just the password itself. I think what that would do is that I think actually it prompts you to restore it. So if it is your security protocol to have people change their password every month, that's just where you would do it.
When it comes to this unit, less is more.
Yeah.
Just keep it between the HVAC guys.
This email and cell phone, you can put them in here as a reference, but it's not actually going to be used to send out email alerts or anything. That's going to be done somewhere else. So just keep that in mind. When you put them, sometimes people fill out their whole email for every user, and expect that to be used, but it's actually not used unless you put it in the email, which will, I guess, set up for you guys initially. Everyone needs to have a nav file, and this is kind of where I was getting at. It's easier to really just duplicate a user, because some of these settings you're not going to be familiar with every time you create a new user. Technically, every user needs a nav file. I'm just going to select operator because it's the same thing, really. A nav file is really just to define the home page. I wish they would just create I wish they would just change it to basically designate the home page, because the nav file is kind of a dated way about doing it, but that's the way you define a home page for every user, so you have to put one in there. And then all of these settings is basically what's it going to look like when you log in. All these like colors and these buttons that I was saying that you can turn off for users are defined by these little checkboxes. Personally, I prefer this lucid scheme, so I'm going to select that. Zebra is like this black and white that's kind of difficult to really read. I'm going to remove some of these that are really more than you need from the web. I'll leave config for you guys, honestly. The nav file tree can stay. These go away. Boom. So we just created our first user there. So you guys should be good to go whenever you get logged in.
Yep, first one fired.
And then moving forwards, if I really wanted to create, if I was going to create more users, I would probably just take the read-only, hit duplicate, create a new name here, and maybe we create one of you guys right now. Do you want to be read-only, or are you guys operate? I guess I'm not sure. Okay, you guys are. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, right. So when you read only, again, it's like you can't really change anything, so it's less.
That's why I was asking on read only, they'll be able to pull trends.
They'll be able to pull trends. It's less important for you to have your own login because you can't do anything. So if you have a shared login, I mean, it's not, and again, it's not really my call anyways, but it's whatever your guys' standards are. But so if you want your own login, or if you want a generic one, then it doesn't matter to me.
And if worse comes to worse, Dave's in the mountains and I'm somewhere and you need to do a change, I can always give you my password for the day to make a point, so you know what I mean?
That's against security practices.
No, just do read only.
Yeah, turn the camera off first.
You can just say Rarebook staff, and it could be, password 1, 2, 3, 4, and then when you get in. I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, because you can't, if it's read-only, you can't do anything, so it's just.
When you log in, Rarebook staff, or help them, right?
And then we don't have to worry about if there's a new staff rate.
RBS, could be RBS, well, it has to be characters, right, the username?
No, it can be whatever you want.
So,
Rare books or staff, or just staff. It could just be staff.
666. Actually, that's the true address of this building.
Rare books is good.
Okay, capital R, lowercase I, yeah. Rare books.
they changed it after they seen posts of different stats.
And then I'll come in here
We
and,
changed it to 700.
Abigail Green, is that
Abigail.
Abigail Green up there?
No, see,
oh, that's the wrong one. I set that to password 1234.
What's your password? Capital P password, 1, 2, 3, 4?
I can set it to whatever you want right now. If, yeah, it's gonna prompt, the first time you log in, it's gonna prompt you to, so I'm just gonna do capital P password 1234. I can type.
we can't log in for a while.
That's why I wanted to write it down, because in like 3 months when we get access to this, I won't know. That's your reason.
Histories, there, that's the one you want to see. And you want that. Nice. I think during non-COVID times, we'd usually like have you guys all try and log in and everything, but just following the standards there, probably won't do that. But if we need to, sometime in the future, once we're fully live and on your network, and if we need to go over any of these settings again, or help get you guys in logged in, like we're always around. So,
Beautiful.
Hmm.
Thank you very much.
yeah.